Good afternoon, everyone. If you don't know who I am, my name is John Crump, and you should know who I am. Today, we're going to be talking about what is going on because this is a move that I haven't seen before, but it looks like we're going to see it. So let's give everyone just a few seconds to get in here, then we're going to jump into it. But I hope everyone is having a happy Monday. And it looks like I might be flying solo today, or Rich might be joining me. I don't know, but we'll see shortly. Maybe Patrick, maybe someone out there will join. But today, it's definitely an interesting topic and something I've never seen happen before, but now it is happening. One way that you know you're winning is when states resort to suing civil rights organizations such as gun rights organizations, because gun rights are civil rights. And we are seeing 15 states sue NAGR and a bunch of other companies here. The brief is 32 pages. We're going to try to keep this kind of quick. So we got to go get my kids. I see Rich joining. But let me go ahead while he is joining in. I am going to go ahead and share my screen here because this case involves multiple states. And let's see here. So New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, which I have a second home in Delaware. I'm a part-time Delaware resident. Colorado, District of Columbia, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan, and Minnesota, and they are suing in the district court for the District of Maryland. And one of the reasons why they are choosing that court leans heavily to the anti-gun side of the issue. Plus, Nevada, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, Washington, and they are suing Pam Bondi, the United States Justice Department, Daniel Driscoll, who is the acting director of the ATF, the ATF themselves, Kevin Maxwell, who owns Rare Breed Triggers, Lawrence DeMonico, who is the owner of Rare Breed Triggers. Rare Breed Triggers, the one that's located in North Dakota. Rare Breed Triggers, the one that's located in Texas. National Association of Gun Rights, who teamed up with Rare Breed to sue. Texas Gun Rights, Patrick Carey, James Wheeler, and Travis Spiegel. Those are the guys that were the named plaintiffs in the NAGR versus ATF case, or NAGR versus Garland, which got the settlement for force reset triggers. All right. So they are, the too long didn't read is that they are trying to invalidate the settlement between the ATF and Rare Breed. We're just going to go over a little bit of here, but the complaint basically says gun violence is a scourge, calls it an epidemic, and they called FRTs a growing threat. And they're saying that this number 5 is interesting because it says the ATF has cloaked this policy in a settlement resolving various lawsuits, including successful enforcement actions in which federal courts ruled that FRTs are machine guns under federal law and entered into a preliminary injunction against the principal distributor, Rare Breed Triggers. The ATF is now walking away from that case entirely. As part of the agreement, the ATF is also reversing course in a case where it appealed for an injunction requiring it to return FRTs. That's NAGR versus Garland. That was down in Texas. And if that wasn't enough, the ATF has elected to go well beyond what the court ordered in that case requires returning FRTs, not just to parties in the litigation, but to anyone, everywhere, as long as it is practical to do so. Then they call it a reckless decision. It says it's violating federal law, which is crazy. If they're trying to claim that they're machine guns, even though they're not machine guns. They don't They don't fall under the definition, the legal definition of a machine gun. The jurisdiction is Maryland, of course, because hey, Maryland is kind of left leaning, and the District Court of Maryland is definitely left leaning, and they're no friends to guns. But who knows? So this just goes through and it lists all the states and who they are, and the defendants: Pam Bondi, Attorney General, the Department of Justice, of course, Driscoll, who is the acting head of the ATF themselves, Kevin Maxwell, owner of Rare Breed, Lawrence and Monica. We already went over this, so we're just going to skip all this. And now it goes into the harms and costs of gun violence. Now, you got to remember, none of this stuff actually matters, even if it's true, which it's not true. It doesn't matter because there's no interest balancing anymore. And if you read through this case, the brief that they filed, the complaint they filed, it seems like they're trying to do a lot of interest balancing. So they highlighted a bunch of like gun deaths and stuff like that across the country, but they don't say how many were committed with FRTs. And I have an idea why they didn't say that. But instead of me saying what my idea is, Rich, why don't you think that they broke it down to crimes done with bingo, as Matt would say? Matt from the when they were writing the Constitution. If you guys don't know who Matt is writing the Constitution, you should look it up. Hit Matt, United States Constitution, you'll see what I'm talking about. And then it talks about deaths of young Americans. Go ahead, Rich.
I've got like 5 things. So first, this only seems obviously that it is the process is the punishment. By that laundry list of names, each one of those individuals, I mean, if you're government, fine, government pays for it. And not like I love Kevin Maxwell, I don't. But I feel for this is BS. He has to have legal representation now, and that costs him money. This case will disappear quicker than a fruit fly because there's no merit to it. But this is a process, is the punishment penalty, period.
Yeah.
When has a case, and I'm asking you, Crump, when has a case like this ever succeeded? Because this is the state governments telling the federal government what you said and have determined is not a machine gun, we're saying is. And like you said, there have been 0 FRT deaths. How do you loop Kevin Maxwell or Rare Breed FRT into this?
Well, you try to obfuscate it.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a slap lawsuit. This is a fraudulent BS lawsuit.
Yeah, but there's no slap lawsuits at the federal level. There's no federal law dealing with slap lawsuits. SLAP lawsuit stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. It's basically a lawsuit just to run up money. They're illegal in a lot of states, and if you get determined that you have a SLAP lawsuit, you have to pay a bunch of fines and pay for like the defense and everything else. But at the federal level, there is no SLAP lawsuits. One of the interesting things is number 46 here, where it talks about injuries from firearms and negative effects from firearms. But none of this stuff here has anything to do with FRTs. Like, go ahead.
How do they determine a shooting cost them $1.5-2.5 million?
I don't know. I mean, did they? I guess
show your math.
Responses and stuff like that. Like uninsured. I don't know. So this is saying this is how much it costs Baltimore. Blah blah blah. Baltimore is a terrible. Then it goes into the federal regulation of machine guns, how it's regulated by the NFA, National Firearms Act of 1934. It gets into the Hughes Amendment a little bit here, and the GCA. But once again, FRTs do not meet the definition of a machine gun. So if they're not machine guns, all this stuff about like the Firearms Owner Protection Act, the Hughes Amendment, everything here is bunk because it does not meet the definition of a machine gun. It does not meet the definition of a MCD, which is a machine gun conversion device. Now, C is interesting because this is, look how they wrote this, because they're trying to claim they sound like they're trying to claim that they're machine gun conversion devices. But read what it says here where I highlighted, Rich.
Well, it says the threat posted by machine gun conversion devices, one thing, and forced reset triggers, another thing. Apple, orange.
Yeah. So it talks about MCDs, but it seems like they're in their statement here, they're admitting that they're not machine guns, that they're not MCDs. So 54 deals with MCDs, 55, 56 MCDs, which have nothing to do with force reset triggers.
So we're talking about like Glock switches here, basically.
Well, look at 57.
States, New Jersey, criminal recovered few. All right, so MCDs have been associated with several criminal incidents in plaintiff states. For instance, New Jersey has identified 26 criminal cases where MCDs have been recovered. A few months ago, a mass shooting took place in Maryland, killing a person and injuring 9 others. The perp was found with a Glock switch, an MCD, which converts semi-automatic firearms into automatic firearms. An AK-47 ATF reports show that state and local law enforcement frequently encounter MCD-equipped firearms as part of criminal investigations. 2023 alone, ATF ran traces on approximately 1,000 MCDs recovered in plaintiffs.
Yeah, a Glock switch is not a force reset trigger. A Glock switch is an MCD. Then it gets into force reset triggers where they were referring to them as two separate things earlier on, but now they're saying that FRTs is a type of MCD.
No.
It does not function as an MCD. A machine gun conversion device converts a semi-automatic firearm into a machine gun that allows it to fire multiple rounds with a single function of the trigger. A force reset trigger does not allow multiple rounds to fire by a single function of the trigger. Each function of a trigger only fires a single round. Therefore, it does not meet the statutory definition of a machine gun. But read number 60.
In a typical AR-type semi-automatic firearm, the shooter must pull and release the trigger for each trigger to fire each shot. Specifically, when the shooter pulls the trigger, it releases the hammer, which strikes the firing pin, initiating the release of a bullet. Upon the bullet's release, the recoil from the shot forces a part known as the bolt carrier backward. It's not recoil, it's the gases, but we'll give them that. The rearward movement of the bolt carrier assembly extracts and then ejects the cartridge case and depresses or cocks the hammer, which is held in place by a part known as the disconnector. The disconnector interrupts the weapon's operating cycle, forcing the shooter to release the trigger and reset it and pull it again to fire the next round.
Now read number 6.
In an FRT trigger assembly, the hammer is modified and the disconnector is removed and replaced with a larger trigger that features a lobe-like sear surface as well as a locking bar. Because an FRT is not a disconnector, it eliminates the need for the shooter to release their pull of the trigger and fire an additional shot. Bogus.
Well, the trigger resets. The trigger definitely resets.
Yes.
Which makes it two functions of a trigger.
In a typical AR firearm, the forward movement of the bolt carrier assembly following a shot loads a subsequent cartridge without releasing the hammer because the disconnector holds the hammer in place. In FRT-equipped firearm, however, the bolt carrier's forward movement automatically releases, no it doesn't, the hammer by striking the locking bar. Thus, the shooter needs to do only one thing, maintain rearward pressure on the trigger, and rounds will be continuously fired. Yeah, no.
Yeah, so They're kind of
They're
not being honest here.
yes, they're faulty with their description.
Then they number 62, they try to say that an FRT equipped AR-15 is basically an M16. And an M16 is an AR-15, but it's a select fire AR-15. And if you put a rare breed trigger in an AR-15, it does not make it select fire. So it says that FRTs have been linked to criminal cases. But what they don't say is those criminal cases are owning the FRTs.
So they're making it like MS-13 is running around with FRTs and committing crimes with FRTs.
Yeah, they're trying to confuse the issue.
All right, so 65. In one incident in 2023, ATF recovered AR-type firearm equipped with an FRT during the execution of the federal search warrant as part of an investigation into an armed narcotics trafficker. ATF found that the firearm had been involved in 7 separate shootings, including drive-by shooting targeting a home and shooting directed at an unmarked police vehicle.
But the FRT, there was okay. So this guy was tied to. If you read the case, there's no indication that that was the firearm used in the drive-by.
Or that the FRT was in the firearm at the time of the drive-by.
Correct. So the ATF, this talks about how the ATF used to consider them machine gun conversion devices, but we have went over that ad nauseum of how their test was failed.
Flawed.
So let's go ahead and then it goes into like wide open trigger and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and talk about the test that they did. What they did is they used a plastic zip tie, which happens to be like a rubber band kind of.
Well, so the question, believe it or not, you could use a Weedly little zip tie that will stretch, or you could use a beefier zip tie which will not stretch.
Yeah,
I just happen to have zip ties here.
Now, number 73 goes into how it takes for each individual retrieval or FRT requires 16 to 24 man hours. So they spent thousands of man hours to confiscate these triggers, which is probably true. They probably did, but they confiscated them against the law. They took people's property where they should not have taken their property. So whose fault is that? The people that got their property illegally seized or the people that illegally seized the property?
Wow, I spent a lot of time committing crimes.
Yeah, exactly. But then it goes into the New York case where they got the injunction against rare breed.
Yeah, so.
And this is where number 75. Go ahead, read this.
In February 2023, the United States filed a civil forfeiture action in the District of Utah. See blah. Let's see. The action sought the forfeiture of approximately 1,000 FRTs and various FRT component parts that had been seized from the defendant, DeMonico, and certain subcontractors of rare breed trigger defendants.
Okay. What interesting thing, civil forfeitures, right? If I brought a case against you, Rich, I would have the burden of proof.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I would have the burden of proof. I would have to prove that whatever I'm taking from you is being used in a criminal conspiracy. Through civil forfeiture, which is legalized theft, that burden of proof doesn't exist because the
FRTs would have to defend themselves.
Yeah, they're suing the inanimate objects, and that's the reason. Anytime you see civil forfeitures, it's usually because they don't have enough evidence to push for a case against the person. So the burden, the burden and the barriers are so much lower in the civil forfeiture that right, we got to wrap this up in about 5 minutes. So this is go through NAGR, the lawsuit in NAGR, the deadline. You guys know about all this. And this is about the government saying that they're going to
Return the triggers by a certain date and time.
and they have an issue against Trump's executive order protecting Second Amendment rights.
Mm.
And they're against that, amazingly. So, I mean, and then it gets into dismissing and everything. So, right here, they talk about the harms imposed on the plaintiffs and the plaintiff states by the redistribution policy. In order to take a preliminary injunction, you have to show irreparable harm. F is they're trying to say there's irreparable harm because it's going to be almost impossible to track down these if they get around the country, and people would resell them and stuff like that.
Lordy, private property sales, huh?
Yeah. And then it gets into how like some people who are not allowed to own guns might get them. Well, if you're not allowed to own a gun, you're breaking the law already by owning a gun. So there you go. So then 91 says it puts the public at like greater risk. 92 says they're going to be used more in crimes. 93 says that they believe that the crime's going to go up, and 94 says if they put them on there, all shootings are going to become more violent and more deadly. So they're asking so they're saying that, that these are machine guns. Here they're saying that the government's acting in contrary to the law, and they want the redistribution policy canceled. They want a preliminary injunction forcing the triggers not to be redistributed. They want to vacate the redistribution policy, and they want the states to have all their attorney fees paid for.
So this is the list of attorneys you should never use.
Well, no, these are right here. These are attorney generals.
Oh, okay. So, Crump, can I buy an FRT today? Is it legal for me to buy an FRT?
You're in Florida.
Well, all right. If I was in a free state other than Florida,
yes, it would be legal.
So they're saying the ATF confiscated these lawful legal devices and is going to be returning them to their rightful owners, who could today buy one legally, and they don't want that to happen.
Correct. But yeah, I mean, this just pisses me off. But I gotta go get my kids in like 1 minute. I heard the same thing. I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't really. I hear NAGR is helping rare breed sear triggers who sell the super safeties. I've heard that too, but I don't know how true it is. I'm gonna have to look into it.
So there's a bunch of super safety lawsuits out there. Actually,
we did a stream with
Stephen Stambolier.
Yeah, and I
has been talking about
that with him too.
And as far as, and again, I'm not a super mechanical engineer, but the Hoffman Tactical 2 Super Safety, which is 2 pieces, unlike the rare breed trigger, it's a completely different design. Unless you say fingers work a certain way, and I patented fingers, you can't stitch those two together. That's not happening.
Hook, no, they actually filed lawsuits on Friday. against a bunch of different companies. Uh, uh, let's
You,
see.
you can file a C&D all you want. It's not legal. It doesn't mean anything.
Malicious lawfare, that would be a slap lawsuit. On the federal level, there is no such thing as a slap case.
Well, and look at, and I don't mean to be a complete dick either, because I believe in the Second Amendment, period. But Rare Breed had a C&D letter from the ATF, and they kept selling.
Yeah, exactly.
I say do it if it's good for DeMonico. Do it.
The Monaco, I mean, is his
Maxwell
name
and
Mark
DeMonico did it.
Monaco or is his name Larry Lee? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I gotta look into that. All right, guys, that is it. We're gonna get out of here. I gotta go get my kids, and you guys have a great day. Okay. Well, bye. Thank you, Rich, for coming on.
Crumpy.